They stopped respecting you. Not all at once, not in one moment you could point to and say, there, that is, when it happened. It was slower than that, quieter, a gradual shift in how conversations moved around you instead of toward you, in how decisions landed before your input arrived, in how someone who used to wait for you to finish now finishes before you do. You felt it before you could name it. And the worst part is not that it happened. The worst part is you do not know exactly what caused it. You replay the moments. You analyze the interactions. You look for the mistake you must have made, but nothing stands out. Nothing obvious. That is because it was never one mistake. Machiavelli understood something about respect that most people never grasp. He wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be few, experience what you really are. But he meant something deeper than simple deception. He meant that perception is not passive. It is constructed. Every day, in every interaction, people are building a picture of you. And they are not building it from your intentions. They are building it from your patterns. The patterns you show when nothing important is at stake. The patterns you reveal when you think no one is measuring anything. The patterns you cannot see because you are inside them. Those patterns are the data. And somewhere along the way, the data started telling a story you did not intend to write. There are 6 warning signs, 6 patterns that quietly revise how much respect the people around you are willing to give. Most men exhibit at least 2 of them without knowing it. Some exhibit all 6. By the end of this, you will know exactly which ones apply to you. And more importantly, you will understand the mechanism underneath each one well enough to stop it. The 6th sign is the one most men never suspect, and it is probably running right now. 6. And this one is already happening every time someone tests you. You are in a room. A comment lands that feels off. Not aggressive exactly, but pointed, aimed. Something about how you handled a situation. Something about a decision you made. Something that carries just enough edge that your body registers it before your mind fully processes what was said. And you moved, not dramatically, not an outburst, just enough. A slight shift in your energy. A response that came half a second faster than it should have. A change in your tone that the room noticed before you did. You reacted. Most men believe reacting is honest. That showing you felt something is authentic. That responding to disrespect with visible displeasure demonstrates you will not be pushed around. It is the opposite. A visible reaction is not strength. A visible reaction is information. Information about what moves you, what lands, what direction produces that specific response. And once that information is out, it cannot be taken back. Machiavelli would look at this moment and see it clearly. You just gave them a map to every button you have, and maps get used. The man who can be moved can be positioned. The man who can be positioned can be managed. And managed people are not respected. They are handled. There is a meaningful difference. In 1809, Napoleon summoned his foreign minister, Talleyrand, before the entire French court. What followed was one of the most brutal public humiliations in diplomatic history. Napoleon screamed at him for 30 minutes, called him a thief, called him a traitor, called him filth in silk stockings. The entire court watched. Ambassadors from a dozen nations stood in silence as the most powerful man in Europe unleashed his fury. Talleyrand did not move. Not a flinch, not a change in posture, not a flicker across his face. He stood completely still, watching Napoleon with the same expression he might wear watching weather through a window. When Napoleon finally exhausted himself and stormed out, Talleyrand turned to the nearest ambassador and said quietly, "What a pity that so great a man should have such poor manners." That single moment is remembered 200 years later, not because Talleyrand won an argument, because he demonstrated something far more valuable. He showed the room that Napoleon could scream, could threaten, could deploy every weapon in his arsenal, and none of it would land. Napoleon died in exile at 51, Talleyrand died in his own bed in Paris at 84, having served and outlasted 6 different French regimes. The Talleyrand Mask. Let them see nothing. Let them wonder what is behind the stillness. That wondering is the respect. Here is what this looks like in practice. Someone tests you. The comment lands. You feel the pull to respond. Let 1 second pass before you do anything. In that second, ask yourself one question. Does this deserve the full weight of my reaction? Most of the time, the honest answer is no. The situation does not require everything you are about to give it, and the version of you that gave less is the version the room cannot read. The room cannot calculate what it cannot see. That is the 6th sign. You react when you should observe. Reactions reveal what you value, but there is something even more expensive you might be giving away. 5. This one is harder to hear because it feels like the right thing to do. A decision did not go your way. A project landed short. An outcome missed the mark you set. And before anyone asked, before anyone raised an eyebrow or requested clarification, you started explaining why it happened, what the circumstances were, why the situation was more complicated than it appeared from outside. You thought you were being transparent, responsible, the kind of person who takes accountability. You were not. You were signaling that there is a gap between how you are being perceived and how you want to be perceived, and you need their help to close it. That gap only matters if you can feel it, and if you can feel it, the room can see it. The explanation does not close the gap. It confirms the gap exists, and once confirmed, it gets filed. Here is how the pattern builds. The first explanation gets noted, not judged, just noted. The second one gets expected. The room starts to anticipate it. They know that when things go sideways, you will appear with the account of why. By the third, you have become predictable under pressure. And the moment you become predictable under pressure, you become manageable. Balthasar Gracián was a Jesuit priest in 17th century Spain who wrote 300 maxims on power strategy and human nature. His work influenced Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and every strategist who followed. One of his central principles was this: never explain. He wrote it plainly. The moment you justify, you become a defendant, and defendants do not command respect. They petition for it. Gracián served in the court of Philip IV, surrounded by rivals who wanted his position and enemies who wanted his silence. He survived 3 decades in that environment by following his own principle with brutal consistency. When his superiors questioned his decisions, he answered with results. When rivals spread rumors about his methods, he published another book. When the Jesuit order eventually turned against him and stripped his privileges, he said nothing in his own defense. He simply continued working until his death. His reputation outlasted his enemies by 4 centuries. The Gracián Reserve. Results require no explanation. Explanations require results you do not have. Here is the practice. Something goes wrong. The room is watching. You acknowledge the outcome in 1 sentence. Then you say what comes next. Nothing about why. Nothing about circumstances. Nothing that suggests the result requires defense. That response tells the room something completely different than the explanation would have. It tells them you expected to navigate this, that the outcome did not surprise you enough to explain, that you are already past it and moving. The man who is already past it is the man the room watches more carefully. That is the 5th sign. You explain when you should remain silent. If you have been here watching this far, you are not looking for entertainment. You are looking for something you can actually use. This channel exists for that person. If that is, you subscribe. Explanations reveal doubt, but the 4th sign reveals something even more dangerous about your position. You have been here before. 4. You got access to a new room, a meeting you were invited into, a project you were brought onto, a conversation where someone decided you belonged. And the first thing you felt was the need to justify the inclusion. to prove that whoever brought you in was right to do it. So you gave everything immediately, every idea you walked in with, every angle you could see from where you were standing, every observation, every connection, every piece of value you could contribute. All of it, right away, as much as possible. You left nothing in reserve, because holding back felt like not doing your part, and you wanted to show you belonged there. Here is what actually happened. You showed the room where your ceiling is. They saw the full inventory, and once they have seen the full inventory, there is nothing left to wonder about. The wondering is the attention. The wondering is the respect. When you give everything immediately, you become the person whose contribution is always available, which means it is never urgent. You can get it whenever you need it. It will be there. Compare that to the person who gives selectively, who holds something back out of genuine judgment about what the moment actually needs, who speaks when they have something the room has not arrived at yet. That person stays interesting, and interesting people get brought back. Francis Walsingham served as Elizabeth I's spy master for nearly 2 decades. He built the first modern intelligence network. He uncovered assassination plots, managed double agents, and protected the Queen through some of the most dangerous years of her reign. But his real power came from something simpler than spy networks. No one ever knew how much Walsingham knew. He would sit in council meetings and say almost nothing while others debated. Ministers would reveal their positions, their alliances, their concerns. Walsingham listened. When he did speak, it was brief, specific, and it always contained something that made the room realize he knew more than he had shown. The Queen herself never knew the full extent of his information. He revealed only what was necessary for the decision at hand, never the full picture, never the complete inventory. That uncertainty was his real protection. You could not outmaneuver someone whose capabilities you could not measure. You could not betray someone who might already know what you were planning. The Walsingham Watch. Keep them guessing. Keep them uncertain. Let them build their estimate of your depth from incomplete data. He died in office, still indispensable, still unknown. The application is straightforward. The next time you enter a new room, resist the urge to prove your value immediately. Contribute something specific. Then wait. Let them wonder what else you have. That wondering does more for your position than everything you were about to give away. Your ceiling is the most valuable information you possess. Once revealed, it cannot be unrevealed. That is the 4th sign. You show your ceiling too early. That is the mechanism of being read too quickly. But there is a deeper problem most men never see, until it has already cost them. 3. Before this one lands, think about the last time you agreed to something that felt slightly off. Not clearly wrong, not obviously exploitative, just off. Terms that did not quite match what you were worth. A favor that asked more than it returned. An arrangement where the balance tilted slightly, but noticeably away from you. And you accepted anyway, because pushing back felt difficult, because the relationship mattered, because you told yourself it was not a big deal. It was a big deal. Every time you accept terms that diminish you, you are not just agreeing to those terms. You are establishing what you will accept. And that establishment becomes the floor for every future interaction with that person. Worse, it gets observed. Other people watch what you accept. They calibrate their own offers based on what they see you take from others. The terms you accepted from one person become the starting point for negotiations with everyone else who was watching. Machiavelli would recognize this instantly. He would say you just taught them where your resistance stops. You showed them exactly how much pressure it takes to move you, and that information spreads without anyone saying a word. Cornelius Vanderbilt built the largest fortune in American history in the 19th century. Railroads, shipping finance. By the time he died, he was worth more than the entire United States Treasury. But his defining characteristic was not ruthlessness or intelligence. It was this. He never accepted unfavorable terms. Ever. Early in his career, a group of established shipping magnates offered him a deal. They would pay him to stop competing with them on a particular route. The money was significant. The offer seemed reasonable. Vanderbilt calculated something different. If he accepted payment to stop competing, he would establish himself as someone who could be paid off. Every future competitor would know that the way to handle Vanderbilt was to offer him money to go away. He refused. Then he doubled down on that route and drove every one of them out of business within 3 years. Decades later, when he controlled most of American shipping and rail, he was asked why he had been so uncompromising in those early years. His answer was simple. A man who can be bought once can be bought forever. The Vanderbilt Walk. Walk away from any deal that positions you as someone who accepts less than you are worth, even if the immediate cost is high. Especially then, here is how to apply this. The next time someone offers you terms that feel slightly diminished, do not negotiate within those terms. Challenge the frame itself. Say no. Let them recalibrate. The short-term discomfort of refusing is nothing compared to the long-term cost of being known as someone who accepts whatever is offered. Once you have accepted diminishment, you have to earn your way back to neutral. Most men never do. That is the third sign. You accept terms that diminish you. Most men learn these patterns the hard way. By losing something they cannot get back. If this is landing differently than content you have seen before, subscribe. I drop a breakdown like this every week. Accepting bad terms reveals desperation. But the second sign reveals something about your fundamental orientation that is even more difficult to hide. This is the one most men file under being collaborative. It is not being collaborative. 2. There is a decision in front of you. Something within your domain. Something you have the authority to choose. Something that does not actually require anyone else's approval. And yet you ask. You frame it as getting buy-in. Building consensus. Making sure everyone is aligned. The language sounds responsible. Mature even. But here is what the room hears. I am not sure I can make this decision alone. And if you are not sure, they become sure. They become sure that you need their involvement, that your confidence requires external support, that you are not fully capable of independent judgment. That perception spreads. I have watched this happen enough times to know it follows the same pattern. A man asks for input he does not need. The people he asks start expecting to be asked. They begin to see their involvement as necessary. Soon he cannot make a move without checking first. Not because he needs to, because he established that dynamic himself. Belisarius was the greatest general of the Byzantine Empire, possibly one of the greatest military commanders in history. He reconquered North Africa. He retook Italy. He defeated enemies that outnumbered him 5-1. He did this while serving an Emperor Justinian who was paranoid jealous and constantly looking for reasons to destroy him. Belisarius survived 30 years in that environment by understanding one principle perfectly. Never ask permission for what you are willing to take responsibility for. When he invaded North Africa against an army 3 times his size, Justinian's advisors told him to wait, to reinforce, to delay until conditions improved. Belisarius listened to their concerns. Then he invaded anyway. He did not ask if he could, he informed them that he would. When he captured Rome, then lost it, then recaptured it with a depleted army, and no reinforcements, he did not request approval for his tactics. He executed them. Then he reported results. Justinian stripped him of command twice, accused him of treason once, confiscated his wealth, and both times when the empire faced a crisis it could not solve, Justinian had to bring him back, because Belisarius was the only man who could act without asking first. The Belisarius Silence. Do not ask permission. Inform them of your decision. Let them object if they will. Then proceed anyway if the choice is sound. Here is what this looks like in practice. Before you ask for input on a decision within your authority, pause. Ask yourself one question. Am I asking because I genuinely need their perspective, or am I asking because I want coverage if this goes wrong? If the answer is coverage, you already know the decision. Make it. Own it. The respect you gain from decisive, independent action is worth more than the protection you thought you were buying. That is the second sign. You seek permission you do not need. Permission seeking reveals uncertainty. But the first sign, the deepest one, reveals something about your fundamental relationship with yourself. Last one. And this is the reason everything else in this video exists. Because you can fix every other sign. You can stop reacting, stop explaining, stop showing your ceiling, stop accepting diminished terms, stop asking permission. And if this one remains, none of it will hold. There is a version of you that exists in the minds of the people around you. Not the version you have told them about. Not your best moments or your stated intentions. A version built entirely from observation. From the pattern of ordinary moments, how you handle small friction, how you talk about others when the stakes feel low, how you carry yourself when you think no one is measuring anything. Those moments are not breaks from the assessment, they are the majority of it. Most men manage the significant moments. They are careful in the big meetings, composed in the high-stakes conversations. They know when the lights are on and they perform accordingly. But the lights are not the only thing the room sees. The room sees the hallway, the offhand comment, the reaction when plans change unexpectedly, the face you make when someone else gets credit, the tone you use with people who cannot advance your position. And that data assembles into a picture far more accurate than the curated version you have been managing in the significant moments. Machiavelli understood that perception is built from patterns, not peaks. He advised that a prince should be obsessed with the ordinary, not just the exceptional, because ordinary moments reveal the nature underneath. Michelangelo spent 4 years painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling, 16,000 square feet, 300 figures. The most ambitious artistic project of the Renaissance. He worked in brutal conditions, scaffolding that destroyed his back, paint dripping into his eyes, a pope who demanded faster progress and threatened to have him thrown off the scaffold. But what defined Michelangelo's reputation was not the ceiling. It was what people observed when they visited his workshop. They saw a man who slept in his boots because he could not waste time removing them, who ate only when forced and kept working by candlelight until his body gave out, who treated a minor commission with the same intensity as a papal commission, who argued with popes about artistic integrity, but never with assistants about credit. The ceiling was the result. The daily pattern was the proof. When other artists competed for commissions by promising faster work or lower costs, patrons chose Michelangelo anyway, even when he was difficult, even when he was slower, because they had seen how he operated when no one important was watching, and that observation told them everything. The Michelangelo Stand. Your pattern is your proof. The ordinary moments are the majority of the assessment. Manage them with the same intensity you bring to the significant ones. Here is the practice. Pick one room that matters to you, not your best performance in that room, your average day. The version of you that shows up when nothing significant is at stake. Is that person the person you intend to be in that room? If there is a gap, the gap is information. And the moment you see it clearly, the next ordinary moment can be different. That is the first sign, and the deepest. Your pattern does not match your words. A man sits in a room he has been in many times before. The conversation moves the way it always has. But today he is watching differently. Not the content of what is being said, the pattern underneath it. The consistent, ordinary, unremarkable pattern of how the room moves and who it moves toward. He can see it now. He did not see it before. He does not say anything about it. He just files it. And tomorrow he will show up 1 degree differently than he did today. Not dramatically, 1 degree. Held consistently. 6 warning signs. None of them require a confrontation. None of them require an announcement. All of them require the same thing: the willingness to look at what the room has actually been seeing instead of what you have been intending to show. Intention is private, pattern is public, and respect responds to pattern. You have been running at least one of these signs without knowing it, probably two, maybe more. The question is not whether you have exhibited them. Almost everyone has. The question is whether you can see them clearly enough now to choose differently. Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors the man who adapts his methods to the times. But he also wrote that most men cannot adapt, not because they lack the ability, because they cannot see themselves clearly enough to know what needs to change. You just saw yourself more clearly than most men ever will. What you do with that clarity is the only thing that matters now. If something in this video shifted how you see your own patterns, the subscribe button exists. I release a breakdown like this every week. Each one goes deeper than the last. The next video covers the 7 ways powerful men control how people see them, not through force, through mechanism. That video is on screen now.